Good evening, everyone. I assume that many of you are in the Northeast, but maybe there are people from all over the place. And I really appreciate this opportunity to be with you and share with you and spend a little bit of time together in the midst of a very busy, difficult time. I just want to say, before I go any further, that I've seen the lineup that Kane has, and they are just extraordinary people. And next week, Meredith White is not only a colleague of mine, we work in the same school system, Gwinnett County Public Schools in Georgia. It's one of the largest school systems in the country. Uh, she's also a personal friend, and she is amazing. And it doesn't matter that she teaches lingua barbarica. Whatever she brings to you will be amazing. So plan on being with her. So let me just give you a little bit of background that kind of informs the things that I want to share with you tonight. I do teach in Gwinnett County Public Schools. It is not only the largest school system in Georgia, it's the largest employer in the state of Georgia. We are part of Metro Atlanta, which is a 5 million people metro, and 1 million of those 5 live in Gwinnett County. It has also been deemed by some sources as the most multicultural county in the United States. I don't know how you determine that, but I do know that it's true for us that we are an incredibly multicultural community. The second largest language in the state of Georgia besides English is Korean. And there's a huge Korean community right here around my own neighborhood. We have one of the largest Hindu temples outside of India, 2 miles from my school. It's just an incredible community to live in. And right now, a pretty challenging community to live in because of the pandemic. We have 182,500 students in our school system. We have 23,000 teachers. And right now, our school system is engaging in hybrid teaching and learning. And what that means is that parents have had the choice of whether to send their students to school or to keep their children at home for online learning. And we didn't start the school year that way. By the way, we are about to begin our 5th week of school. We've been in school for almost 5 weeks. And we started with 100% online learning, thinking that's how we would spend the semester. And after 7 days, the district announced that they would begin phasing students back in. And so we faced the challenge of having spent, and they gave us 2 weeks of preparation for teachers. We spent 2 weeks preparing to teach 100% online. We had about 5 days of that before the decision was made to phase students back in. And it was just this incredible upside down experience of, I think I almost have this, now you're asking me to do something very different. So 30 to 40% of our students right now are in person, and 60 to 70% of our students are online. And so every hour of the day, we teach with some students in the room and most of our students at home. And we face the challenges of what that looks like. And so tonight I want to share with you not only some things that I've learned to do in the last few years with regards to community and sharing power. So the title of my presentation tonight is Creating Community, Sharing Your Power. But what that has looked like in the last 5 weeks as we have sort of been forced into this extraordinarily unusual situation. I know that you as teachers face so many different settings right now. Some of you are just beginning school. Some of you have been in school as long as we have, and some less. Some of you are facing hybrid situations that are sort of like mine or different. Others of you are facing 100% online. Some of you are facing situations where you've been given an option as a teacher about how you teach. In our system, we were not given options. We were told this is how we will teach. And so we're all facing really, They just aren't words. Exhausting, taxing, anxious, worrying situations. And I am with you in that. All of those adjectives describe me. And I'm in my 31st year of teaching. If that makes you feel better or worse, I don't know. This is my 31st year of teaching, and all of those adjectives describe me. Whatever you want to say about how you teach Latin or the languages that you teach, and we could do that for hours, by the way, I've come to the conclusion that the most basic foundation that is required for success, whatever else you do, is trust, is establishing trust in our classrooms. And I invite you for just a few minutes to think about what creating trust means for you and for your classroom. And I will tell you that I've moved to the place where I feel like, regardless of what's on my syllabus, regardless of whatever the district curriculum map or calendar looks like, if I don't devote enough time to establishing trust in my classrooms, nothing else on the calendar or the map makes much difference. If students don't trust me, and if I don't trust them, then what I have planned, however good or wonderful that may be, and I do think that my plans are wonderful, just like you do, right? If students don't trust me, if I don't feel a trust towards them, then what I have planned is not really going to work. So there's, for me, the first few weeks of school are not about reviewing grammar. It's not about reviewing vocabulary. It's not about reviewing anything. It's about establishing trust. It's about nurturing trust. It's about inviting students who may never have met me before into a conversation about what trust looks like. I will say to you that it's become powerfully clear to me that trust has to be a two-way street. I think that as Latin teachers, we have studied in, and we have been a part of a tradition that, you know, like it or not, has sort of had the attitude that I'm the Latin teacher. I walk in, I have my credentials, I have my experience, I have my know-how. You have to trust me. And the reality of today's students is that they don't have to trust us at all. And the other part of this sort of traditional approach, and I'm a part of that, is that I don't necessarily need to trust them. But the reality is that if what we're going to do together works, it has to be a two-way street. So nurturing trust means nurturing ways that I can trust my students and nurturing ways that they can trust me. And I am, after all, the adult in the room, so the nurturing part falls on me in many respects. And then once that has begun, students surprisingly will show up and nurture some of the trust in me on their own. And that's really powerful when that happens. This two-way street takes in a couple of other issues. Respect. I think that when I was going through school and all of its different levels, I'm 60 years old, so it's been a long travel of going through school. Responsibility was something that meant from teachers to students, do what I say, do, or I'll hurt you. Now, nobody ever said that, right? Nobody ever said I'll hurt you. But be responsible meant do what the teacher tells you. And instead, what I like to think of responsibility as that everybody involved is responding appropriately to the situation. The other thing that has a two-way street is respect. Again, we walk in the door of a classroom as teachers and we expect students to respect us because we're the teachers, and we just don't live in that time anymore. We just don't. And so cultivating some respect for me means that I try to demonstrate respect for my students. So, and that's a new way of thinking about things for a lot of teachers. Let me tell you a little bit more about my school and my setting. and then I'm going to jump into the specifics of tonight. I teach in a school that has 3,200 students, grades 9 through 12, 3,200 students. There's 6 of us who teach Latin. We have created a program that right now 1/4 of the school is involved in. So 800 students are taking Latin this year. This has not been a quick process. It's been about a 15, 16-year process of working to create a Latin program that welcomes, invites, and makes possible for success all kinds of learners. And I'm here to tell you that we have succeeded in this. We have succeeded in encouraging and in alluring and enticing and inviting and welcoming into our program all kinds of learners. There is not a demographic in our school that is not in our Latin program. And that is wonderful. And that has created some problems. And I mean problems ultimately in a good way. So let's get started with that kind of background with what I want to share with you tonight. So I'm sharing with you now my screen and some slides that I have prepared for tonight. So a big part of what I want to share with you tonight is inspired by and grounded in the work of Christopher Emdin. Christopher Emdin is a professor in, I think, the Department of Education, the Teachers College in Columbia University in New York. I've had the opportunity of hearing him speak at the lecture series at the University of Georgia in Athens. And my 5 colleagues and I, who teach Latin together, 2 years ago did a study of this book of his for white folks who teach in the hood, and the rest of y'all too: Reality, Pedagogy, and Urban Education. I'll tell you that my school system has twice won the Broad Prize, which is an award given to the most outstanding urban school system in the country. It comes with $1 million award to be dispensed to seniors for college scholarships. So my school system has proven itself to be a really strong and positive school system. And we are, as a part of Metro Atlanta, an urban school system. So we did this study of Christopher Emdin's work. And while tonight is not a book report, I'm not going to pretend to tell you and teach you what Christopher Emdin does in this work. I really want to entice you to go get the book. And I want to entice you to find some others who will study it with you. And I want to entice you to think of it as a guide that needs to be read and reread and reread. And when you run into a roadblock, go back and read it again, or at least read pieces of it. So here was my situation. 2 years ago, I had what I now think of as that most troubling Latin 3 class, full of what I've now said to you, all kinds of learners from our school. And I knew that I was failing to build any real trust with them. See if I can get some, there we go. It was a 6-period class, which was towards the end of my day. It was Latin 3, all kinds of learners, and it was, and you all know what I'm talking about, it was a toxic mix of students. Toxic meaning the mix wasn't working for me, right? This particular group of kids came in. Some of them I had taught 2 years previously in Latin 1, and some of them were brand new to me. In a program as large as ours, we can no longer follow through with all of our students. And there was this mix of students in the room that had a particular student at the center of the mix that I'm going to refer to as Mr. Troublemaker. And every single day was a challenge to the mat about who would win the fight of the wills. And it's not the way that I teach. It's not what I expect. And I think that's the problem. This group of students was coming in and they were not what I was expecting. And if there's nothing else that I can convey tonight, it's that what we as teachers, what we as Latin teachers expect from students when they walk in the room in terms of who they will be can be really, can be the real toxic thing in the mix. What I was expecting of them when they walked in the room, not what I was expecting of what they could do with Latin or what I was expecting, so high expectations, we all know students tend to rise to those, not those expectations, but expectations about who they were as they entered the room. So I was 29 years into my career, and I did not know what to do with this group. And it was the same sort of bad experience every day. I got to the point where I dreaded sixth period. And maybe you've had that sort of experience before. I felt like that whatever I had tried to do in terms of trust, building trust, nurturing trust, respect and responsibility as a two-way street that I had done in the past simply was a fail in this class. So I had already read Christopher Emdin's book myself. This was before we had done the study as a group. And so I went back to it. And that's why I say sort of treat it like a manual, treat it as a book of wisdom, if you will, knowing that you can't just read it and put it down. You're going to have to keep going back to it. And so I don't know what it is about language teachers. We love to organize everything around C's. All of his points are C words. I knew that there was a dynamic thing that he set up called a Cogen conversation, short for cogenerative. So I went back to look at how that was set up and decided that what did I have to lose with this group, because it was just working so badly. Maybe I should try this Cogen conversation group. And we were already halfway through the year. It was December. On the winter break, I went back and I reread this sort of section of Emdin's book and decided that when January came, I was going to try and set this up. And so, one of the things that this Cogen group is an invitation to 4 students from a particular class to meet with you on a regular basis to talk about what's working and what's not working in the class. And he has some very specific guidelines, and I followed them to the T about this. He says, first of all, before you can even start a Cogen conversation, you have to know who the students are in your room, and not just their names, but you have to know some things about them. You have to know the demographics. You have to know the kinds of things they like, the kinds of things they hate, and so forth and so on, so that the 4 students that you invite to your Cogen conversation will be representative of the whole, which, is not an easy kind of decision to make. It's easy to think, which 4 students would I love to have a weekly conversation with? But that's not what a Cogen conversation is. A cogenerative, creating and birthing something together kind of conversation needs to have representatives of the whole room. So I spent some time thinking about who those 4 would be. Of course, Mr. Troublemaker needed to be one of them, to my deep despair, because I had already developed this. Even though I had taught him as a Latin 1 student, I just had developed this sense of dread when he came into the room, because he was at the center of all of that seemed toxic to me. He had to be one of them. I ended up choosing, and by the way, he is a young man of African origin and European origin, living in the United States with his parents, has completely grown up as an American young man, and did not think of himself as Black. And I just tell you that to say that walked in the room with him every day. This Black young man walked into the room every day. This young man appearing to be Black to everyone else, who was clear that he was not Black. So that walked into the room with him every day. I also chose a Latina young woman who was absent a lot. That was kind of risky. Maybe she wouldn't even show up to the meetings, but she was absent a lot. But when she was there, she was very, very quiet and withdrawn. She represented something in the room that was not being spoken. I chose a white young woman who was shy and naive and also fairly quiet, but when she spoke, it was almost always awkward. She represented something in the room. And there was, I chose a white young man who had told me on a number of occasions that he struggled with depression, but that he loved my class. And he represented something in the room. And they seemed to me to represent the dynamics of the room. And so I went to each of them and I asked them if they would join me at 6:50 in the morning every Wednesday, because my school starts teaching at 7:20 in the morning. And we needed at least 15 minutes for our meeting. And I said to them, you're not in trouble. This is all Christopher Emden's script. You're not in trouble. I would love for you to come and be a part of a special group that meets once a week on Wednesday mornings at 6:50. And I want you to help me make our class a better experience. That was the invitation to each student, with a little bit something more, that I would bring breakfast. And so they needed to tell me what they liked for breakfast. And they were all kind of hesitant about that, but they finally told me, and it was orange juice, and it was croissants or donuts or something like that, something I would never have eaten for breakfast, but it's what they wanted. So I brought breakfast, and they actually came. These four actually came, and they showed up. And the most amazing thing to me from the beginning, besides the fact that they showed up, was that at 6:50 in the morning, in the room with just the five of us, they were very different people. Mr. Troublemaker did not bring the hostility into the room that he did sixth period. The Latina young woman came in and she was so thoughtful and she was so articulate in ways that I never heard her speak in my classroom. That sort of naive young white woman asked great questions. And the white young man who struggled with depression actually found his voice and was able to articulate some things. They were just different people, and that blew my mind. They were not the people that I had been expecting every day, you see, and that's on me. So the one question that I asked every time we met, and we met every Wednesday from January until early May. Our school ends third week of May. So all of spring semester, we met every Wednesday morning at 6:50 with orange juice and some sort of pastry. Was this question: is there anything that we can do to make our class a better experience? It really was the only question. And I don't even know that they noticed, but I know that that's the one question I asked, and then I waited for them to respond. And so there was this day when the Latina young woman said, I wonder, could we spend 5 minutes in class on brags and vents? And I had to have her repeat that a couple of times before I even realized what she was saying. 5 minutes before class starts, for anybody in the room to have the freedom to brag about something or to vent about something. And it so took me by surprise that I said, well, sure, let's do that. And we began to institute that not only in their class, but in all of my classes, and it transformed the entire experience. In fact, it's continuing to transform the experience. Mr. Troublemaker became a class leader, as did the other three in their own rights. They all showed up in class taking some ownership for this thing that we were going to do. And that one experience, that spring of that year, propelled me into another aspect of Emden's work. So the second aspect is what he calls the Cosmopolitan Classroom. The Cosmopolitan Classroom. In the Cosmopolitan Classroom, the variety of human experience that walks into the door is the thing that you pay attention to. You've got your syllabus, you've got your plans, you've got all the things that you collect around yourself and your class to teach Latin, but the thing that you give primary attention to are who are these people walking in the door? Not just name on roster, but who are they really? And how do I get to know them? And that is the kind of building of trust that allows a teacher to begin to share power with students. And you know, whether you thought about it or not, the reality is that in all of our states, in all of our school systems, by law, teachers are given all the power in the room that we need to do what we do. We have all of the power in the room, and if all the power in the room is not enough, we can call on power outside of the room, and they will come in whatever fashion and add to the power that we have. So this creating a cosmopolitan classroom is about finding a way to share that power that we own by law, and doing so as a matter of trust. I have the power. Lindsay, did you want to?
I did, yeah. We have a question that
Sure.
sort of attaches to what you were just saying. Stephanie Piscetta asked, was there any jealousy from the other members of the class that they had not been chosen for that special group that got to come in and have breakfast with you?
Yeah, great question. So it was a secret. And Christopher Emden sets that up. You don't announce to the class that you're doing this. You go to the individual students and you ask them privately, and you ask them to keep it a secret. And it's amazing because they all did. And it was only at the end of the semester that I revealed to the class that this thing had been happening. And the reason that I revealed it, because he doesn't even suggest that you have to do that. But we had such an amazing experience with just this 5 minutes of brags and vents, that I wanted them to get credit. You know, I wanted the four of them, and particularly the young lady who specifically named it, I wanted them to get credit. There was a classroom applause for when I revealed what had happened. So if you announced it out loud, I'm looking for 4 people, I choose you, you, and you, I think that might create. Now, if you go in and look at how he sets up the Cogenerative Conversations, over time, you invite one member of the Cogen group to leave and take specific leadership in the classroom and allow them to appoint somebody to take their spot. And we did do that a couple of times as well. So that's why I'm saying I'm not attempting to tell you everything Christopher Emden has written about, but I do want to entice you to go get his book. And I'm not getting any royalties for that. I just want, he's done amazing work. And so yeah. So there wasn't a problem with that. Okay, so in the Cosmopolitan Classroom, by paying attention to who's in the room and really finding ways to get to know students, and honestly, the brags and vents thing, 5 minutes at the beginning of class, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute, really has helped me get to know my students really well. Think about it, the things that we want to celebrate and the things that we want to, complain about really say something about who we are. They say something about who I am. And so why wouldn't it say something about our students? So that's really opened the door for me to get to know my students. And I have made the decision, and look, I'm at the end of my career. I'm not resigning tomorrow, but I'm at that end of my career. I'm going to spend at least 2 weeks of every beginning of the school year focusing on who are these people in my room. The syllabus is waiting there for me to start working on when I get ready for it, but I can't start working on the syllabus now without knowing who these people are. So the power that we have as teachers, when it is shared with students in our room, makes this room that we're in a better place to learn, and it makes it a better place to be in community. And I'll share with you an example at the very end of the presentation why I think this is true. But I just think that one of the things that we have to teach our students, besides Latin or social studies or science or math or whatever it is we teach, is how to be community, how to be in community, how to take care of each other. And it doesn't require a lot of our time. 5 minutes for brags and vents allows students to really begin to create and be a part of community. So that power belongs to us. It's ours as teachers to set up or prohibit. And I want to encourage that we set those things up. Emden in his work features, this is another one of his C words, co-teaching as a distinct aspect of the Cosmopolitan Classroom. And I have to tell you that this is a place where at first I put the brakes on and said, oh no, not in a language classroom. I mean, co-teaching, what do they know about Latin? And depending on the level that they're in, probably not much. And so sending them off in his model, he has students work in small groups, he assigns them topics, they do their research, he works with them as a small group and helps them get ready to teach that topic to the classroom. I can see that working in social studies. I can see that working with maybe some aspects of English literature, but not in a foreign language. That's my own sort of warning there. Will this work in a language classroom? And I want to come back to that in a little while, because ultimately I think it does, but it doesn't work in the beginning the way that he presents. Emden is speaking as a teacher of educators, and he has to speak in a broad fashion. I just want to say that when you get to that part of his work, if you do, don't let that make you go, oh, wait a minute, this won't work in a language classroom. We all know that in language classrooms, things don't work in language classrooms that might work in other kinds of classrooms, and that's okay, but there's still some things to take from his work. So his work propelled me into creating what I would call a more cosmopolitan classroom, acknowledging who's in the room, getting to know them better, building trust, deepening respect, two-way, deepening responsibility, two-way. And one of the ways that I found to do this was to create a series of jobs, Munera, that I'm calling them. So in 2019, just last year, I started the school year by, and you should know that last year I was teaching Latin 4 and Latin 5 all day. This year I'm teaching Latin 1 and Latin 5 all day. So it's quite a different experience, but you'll see about that in a minute. I set up a series of jobs that was my way of sharing my power with my students. And I gave over to them things that I normally do. And entrusted into them to do a good job. And in addition to that, to do these jobs as much as possible in Latin. And I created lots of flexibility so that in the beginning, they did these jobs using English, and that I was watching over the course of time for them to begin to do those jobs in Latin. And I even created some cheat sheets, if you will, some scripts, some suggested things that they might look at for ways to begin to do their jobs in Latin. So, so let me share with you these jobs that I created. So the first job we called the Dux Telefonorum. Now this was last year, right? We were all in the classroom. The Dux Telefonorum, the leader of telephones. And this person's job was to make sure that as soon as the bell rang, their compatriots in the classroom, their comités, put away their telephones. I don't know about you, but they can be a little distracting in a language classroom. And so what I had suggested for the Dux Telefonorum, whoever took this job, was that they say something like this: Omnes ponite telepona in sacolis, or omnes quaeso ponite teleponum in sacolo. And then once they were clear, it was part of their job to make sure that everybody in the room, all 30 or 32 or 28 or whatever it was, after all the telephones were in their sacolis and not in their fundis, not in their pockets, or not sub clunibus, not up under their butt. We included all those possibilities. Once all the phones were put away, this person went and said, Doctor, omnia telepona deponita sunt. And then it was this person's job to watch for telephones during the period so that I didn't have to, right? And so if the Dux Telefonorum saw that Sally had her phone out, the Dukes had permission to interrupt class and say, Sally, depone telefonum in sacello. And somehow, since it wasn't me, it was one of their own, two things happened. One, they were much less likely to take their phones out. And two, when they got called on it, they took it much better. And it became one of those things that I didn't have to worry about. The second job was the Duke's, I'm sorry, oh, I got ahead of myself. Let's see over here. The Kensor. The Kensor, I don't know, some of the pictures are covering it up for me, but that's what this is over here, the Kensor. The Kensor's job was to take the role for me. As soon as the Dux Teleponorum had made his or her announcement, the Kensor had a clipboard with a roster of the class on it, and they called the roll. And they had to begin by saying, omnes adite bene, respondete ad sum, and then they would call the roll and students would respond. And their job was also to make sure that if somebody didn't have a pen or a pencil and they needed it, they knew where the supply was on the table in the back of the room. And it was also their job that if somebody needed to go to the bathroom, so this was a huge thing that we instituted. Going to the bathroom was no longer something you interrupted my class for. You simply got up and signed out and went to the bathroom. And it was the Kensor's job to make sure if they saw someone moving to leave to the bathroom, scribite nomen, scribe nomen, scribe nomen. There was also a roster there for them to sign out to go to the bathroom. So going to the bathroom became a responsibility they took for their own. I wasn't going to stop teaching. I was going to continue with the class. I wasn't going to be interrupted. They knew how to take care of it. And so that was huge. The next job we called the Dux Ceremonis. Now, so far I've taken, 10 or 15, 20 minutes to describe two jobs, but these first three jobs all took place within the first 5 minutes of class. So this is all happening very quickly. The Dux Ceremonis was the leader of conversation, and this was the student who got to come up front and control the mic, so to speak. And they said, discipuli comites amici habemus quinque minutas ut gloriamur vel queramur quis vult incipere. 5 minutes to brag or vent. And everybody understood that the invitation was going to be given in Latin, but they could brag or vent in English. And so then and it was their job to keep the clock 5 minutes and to cultivate conversation. Not just to make the announcement, but to say, hey, Joel, you look like you want to say something. Oh, so Sheila, what do you want to say to him? And then also to follow up on, hey, Sharma, you said last week that your grandma was sick. How's she doing? So that it began to be this kind of keeping up with each other. It wasn't just brags and vents. It was a way of keeping up with each other. And that's when I knew that there was real community happening. The next job we called the Aestimator. The Aestimator had a couple of jobs. The Aestimator's main job was to write me a note at the end of every class, as much as possible in Latin, about how the class went, what worked, what didn't work, and drop it in my mailbox. I had a little paper mailbox I had created in the room. And they gave me feedback about what we did in the class. Their other job was to listen for people in class who made good contributions and to acknowledge them in the moment. So if we're having class, let's say that somebody makes what the Aestimator said. The Aestimator, it's entirely their judgment, right, about who makes a good contribution. And so the Aestimator might say, Doctor, Sally, she made a great contribution, and Sally gets a sticker. And the Aestimator was in charge of the stickers. And these were seniors. These were seniors who lived for a sticker. And so I'm saying, if you teach third grade or you teach 12th graders, stickers work. So it was my job to make sure there was always a drawer full of amazing stickers. and the estimator's job to dispense the stickers every day. And so that kept the feeling of joy and celebration going. And it was just down to the estimator's judgment of who made a good contribution. The next job were the distributores, and there were always two of them. The distributores were sort of, they did the grunt work. When I needed things passed out, when I needed things taken up, it was their job to come and help me and to ask who needed what sorts of things. And then this was a late job. We added this sort of mid-year, and I made the first word up, tinitor. Really, we should have called it curator tintinabuli, but tinitor had taken hold, and so I couldn't take the word back from them. I brought a bell in like this, and I taught them about how amazing it was to just be quiet while the bell was ringing and to breathe. And the tinitor, or the tinitor's job, was to receive the bell every day from me, and they had to come up and they had to ask for the bell in Latin. And this is what they had to learn to say to me. They would say, Doctor, si tibi placeat, mihi tintinabulum des, et per sessionem id curabo, and I'll take care of it during the class, right? And so they would take it back to their desk. And at any time during the class period, when they felt like we needed a bell, they just rang the bell. And we all agreed that we would stop and breathe and smile and then carry on. And they fought like nuts over who got to be the tinitor. Mr. Troublemaker was the first tinitor because he had to ring that bell. And he set the mark, the benchmark. By the way, Mr. Troublemaker was in my fourth Latin 4 class the next year. Of course he was. But at that point, he was no longer Mr. Troublemaker. But he had to be the bell ringer that first year. So these were the jobs that I set up to help create a cosmopolitan classroom. And what that really means is that I shared my power with the people who were in the room, and I was working at getting to know them, and I was willing to let them have control over things that I normally had control over. And it really became an amazing situation. I'll come back to that at the end. So I'll tell you what's happened this year. By the way, they held their jobs for 3 weeks, and that had more to do with how many were in the room and how many weeks I had. You just do the math and you break it up. They held the jobs for 3 weeks, and they couldn't have the same job twice in a row, and they all had all the jobs many times throughout the year. So this year, the Munera in 2020, you can see from the images that they've gotten smaller because 70% of my students are at home, 30% are in the room, and I had to re-envision what this looked like. I was not willing to give this up. So we still have the Dux Sermones. It's still his or her job after I've called the roll because given the circumstances, that I'm the only one who can see both the students at home and the students in the room. The Dux Sermones leads the conversation, just like we've done before. We still have an estimator whose job is to write me a note at the end of class every day and to call out those students who've made good contributions. Only now they're writing their notes to me in Google Classroom and they're sending it to me electronically. And so it's an electronic document. Honestly, that's easier to keep up with than all the paper. So, you know, that's kind of been a positive shift. The new job I had to create this year is the spectator curiositatis. I would have created this job if we had been COVID-free, because I've come to the conclusion that cultivating curiosity may be one of the most important things that teachers do ever. I don't see enough curiosity in humankind. I see too many adults and certainly too many students just willing to say, tell me what the right answer is and I'll write it down. I want students to be curious. And so the challenge that I've put before all of my students this year is every time you ask a question, I don't care what it is, you get a curiosity point. I'm marking it down in my book. You're getting a grade for curiosity. because I want you to cultivate curiosity. And this student's job is to notice and write down during every class period who asks a question. And they email me at the end of class who asked a question, and they write it in Latin. So every day I get an email from the Spectator Curiositatis with a list of the students who asked questions, and I go into my gradebook and very quickly give them curiosity points. And so the last job, so we only have 4 jobs this year right now under these circumstances, is the Monitor Nuntiorum. It became very clear to me teaching in a hybrid situation that I could not keep up with 2 screens and a chat. And so the Monitor Nuntiorum watches the chat part of Google Meet. I use Google Meet because I'm using Google Classroom and they interface better than Zoom does, although I like Zoom better, but that's a different issue. This person keeps up with what's going on in chat, and they are free to interrupt at any point to say, Doctor, so-and-so has a question. And I stop.
This is the perfect moment.
Yeah, it is.
I have
it
2
is.
pairs of
Go for it.
questions in the chat.
Go for
I
it.
was like, oh, I think I can wait for this job because this is my job. This is me right now. So first of all, there's a request that these slides be shared.
Yep, sure.
Perfect.
I don't know how we do that, but I'm fine with that.
You can send them to me, and I can figure out. I can send them to the people who are registered for the webinar or whatever.
Will do. Sure.
And then Judy Hallett asked, did you describe this amazing mode of classroom management and trust building to parents on back to school night? And if so, how did they feel about it? How did they react?
That's interesting because we haven't had a back to school night this year, because everything has been so disrupted. If parents were coming in for a back to school night like we normally have, absolutely. I would want them to know what we're doing. So we haven't been able to do it this year, but for sure. And I'll tell you though, even without telling parents what's happening, and I absolutely think that would be a good thing, the positivity, the effects of this go home anyway. I hear from parents who say how much their kid loves to be in my class, and it's not about my class, it's about the experience, right? So it's being communicated even without explaining to them what's happening. But I think Judy's she's nailed it. This is something you would want parents to know that you're doing. Yeah.
So you must have started it at the second half of the year last year. Is that why you never got the chance? Okay.
Yeah.
And then sorry.
No, well, we started the Cogen group the second half of 2 years ago, and then last year started this whole jobs thing from the beginning. We did have a parents' night that year. Did we talk about that? We did talk about it a little bit. Yeah, we did. We did.
I know last fall feels like about 400 years ago. So
it does.
One other question that is in the chat is, can students abstain from any job, like all jobs at all? Like, can they say like, I don't want to have a job?
Ultimately, if a student came to me and said, here are my reasons why I just feel like I can't do this, I would pay attention to that. The way that I set this up is that everybody's going to take a job eventually. And in the beginning, I'm going to take volunteers because I know some of you think this is horrifying. I have said that. I know some of you are horrified at the idea. So I want you to watch some of your classmates do it first. And so we'll take volunteers first. And it's interesting. I never had to compel anybody. I always took volunteers. So the first crew were all volunteers. Well, by the second set of 3 weeks, I had 5 or 6 more people who wanted to volunteer. I even had times when people were fighting over who could get which job, so ultimately it was all volunteer, but I set it up in a way that nobody was compelled to do something up front. And I do believe very much if a student came to me and said, I just can't do any one of these jobs, I would have found some other way for them to contribute to the class that wasn't so distressing. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so this is just, I love this little stack of stones. Trust is at the bottom. Create, collaborate, respect, be yourself, positive intent. The teacher in a language classroom is always going to be the language parent in my perspective. we are the language expert. We still have to do the language things, and nobody can do that for us. Setting up this Cosmopolitan Classroom with shared responsibilities where students take these jobs really does create a foundation for what can ultimately be small group research. So what I found is that by the second half of the year or late in the first semester, after we've built this community and we've built this trust and respect, I can say to students, we're going to go to the media center and I'm going to ask you to be in small groups, and I'm going to give you some research challenges. I'm going to give you 2 or 3 days in the media center to do all of your research, and you're going to bring that research back to us. So last year with Latin 4 students, I took personalities, men and women, from each of the 3 political periods of the Roman Empire. I think I had 9 individuals altogether. And so I had 9 groups in the class, and they each went into the media center, and they spent 3 days researching their person. And then we spent the next week with those groups presenting Lucretia and Cicero and whoever the persons were, what they had found out about these people. And then we spent the rest of the semester reading short readings that I created out of a number of resources in Latin about each of those personalities. But they did the research about who this person was. They created the interest and the know-how. And when we got to their person, I was able to say to that group, hey, Cicero group, remind us again what it was he had to do with speeches and speech making and politics, and they were able to jump right in and be the experts in the room. Lucretia group, tell us why this woman seemed to change the entire politics of Rome and what was tragic about her life. And they were able to jump in and be the experts in the room. I don't think that would have worked that way if we hadn't created this foundation to begin with. In my Latin 5 class, we spent spring semester last year until COVID reading Catullus 64, the Epilion of Ariadne and Theseus, and they did all the research on Ariadne and Theseus and Pallas and Thetis and what an Epilion is, and about Catullus and about lyric poetry. And they became the experts in the room of all of that background as we read Catullus 64. So I'm convinced ultimately that we can do co-teaching with our students once we've set up this kind of community in our classroom.
Question in the chat.
Yeah.
I know the answer to this, but I'm going to let you answer it. Do you have AP in your school system, Bob?
We don't anymore. We used to. We are fortunate enough to have a principal who really trusts our professional decisions, and we did not, another hour's conversation, which we don't have time for, but the AP syllabus and the AP course is a course in philology, and we're not teaching philology in our program, we're teaching Latin. So while I have a PhD in Latin philology, so I'm not going to speak against philology, it's just not a part of what we do. And so we don't teach AP anymore. We did for years. We offer Latin 4 and Latin 5 as a 4th year option. We teach Latin 5 a little more like a college class, and Latin 4 is much more comprehensible input like we've been doing, and we let students make the choice. So it's a self-selection at that point.
You have a request for a future talk topic to maybe address how it is that you convinced people to let you get rid of it. So you can put that in your on the back burner. There's also a question, so though this school year is new, so far how has this community building method translated across the hybrid divide in your experience? Yeah,
that's a really important question. It's been slower, but then everything has been slower. 52-minute classes have become 45-minute classes. In fact, I said to one of my classes, I think it was my Latin 5 class today, I said, wait a minute, I've got it on the screen for the kids in the room. Wait a minute, I haven't shared it to those of you at home, and that takes, a little bit of time. And then I just looked at them all and I said, do your other teachers take this much time getting everything shared? And they all nodded their heads. And I said, I feel like such a klutz. I feel like such a klutz all the time because it takes so much time to make sure that everybody can see and hear what they need to see and hear. So everything's going slower. On the other hand, this community building is happening. And so I'm just going to keep trusting the process. It's going to take longer, but it's happening. Okay. So I have found that once this community is built and once I ask students to do some research, that some of the best student research and presentations that I have ever had are coming forth. I just need to get my timing right. I had a group of Latin 5 students a couple of years ago that were on the sort of front edge of this. They were 9 girls in a Latin 5 class, smallest class I've ever had. My Latin 5 class right now is 25 students. And they did some research on other poems of Catullus and put together presentations that I would have taken to Canvas if I had had the timing right to get the proposal in. I would have found a way to get these 9 young women to Canvas to present their Catullus work. It was amazing, and it came out of this tight-knit sense of community, and we work together and we belong to each other, and we can risk asking difficult questions. And so I'm seeing at the upper levels that this kind of work really produces many of the things that we've all always wanted. And this is the last piece. This is what I'm going to close with. So this summer, right before, actually as school was starting back, teachers were back at work, students weren't back at school yet, I got a text message from a student from last year. And she said, one of our classmates from, this is a different 6th period. This was 6th period last year, a Latin 5 class. They were an amazing group of kids that did this whole thing with me. And she said in this text, one of our classmates' mom has died. She dropped dead of a heart attack yesterday. And a bunch of us have been talking. A bunch of us. This is a bunch of us who were in your 6th period class last year. They're still talking to each other. We were thinking, maybe we could do something for him. Will you please help us collect cards that we write for him and somehow get them to him? Because we don't know his address. We don't know where he lives. We just know. So what we put together was that I gave her my address, and I said, I'm going to have a box on the front porch that has cards for your classmate, put his name on it. And any of you who want to can come by my house for the next 3 days and drop cards in there. And I will see to it that he gets them because I had access to his address. And then while that was all happening, every day I would go out and look and there'd be more cards in the box. It occurred to me the last of these 3 days that, oh my goodness, I'm sitting in a school with 175 teachers. I wasn't this kid's only teacher. So I put an email out and I said, you know, some of you may have taught this kid, his mom died. And we're collecting cards, and I've got these cards, and if you want to add to it, I'm going to mail these cards in bulk to his house. And so a number of teachers responded, oh, please, 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 let me contribute, let me contribute, let me contribute. And then another teacher said, if this will help, I live 2 doors down from him. I'll come by your room and pick up all the cards, and I'll deliver them to their house the day after the funeral. Now, that wouldn't have happened without a community in that classroom, I don't think. I look at that as community that lives on beyond the classroom. And it wasn't particularly about Latin, but it was about being good human beings. And ultimately, if I can't contribute to being better human beings, I'm not sure what good my teaching Latin is. That's how I feel about it. So this was just the next piece that convinced me that this kind of work towards community building and trust and a two-way responsibility and a two-way respect was really, really worth it. that it created a community that went on beyond the school year, especially this last school year. So that's it. That's what I have to hopefully entice you with. And I don't know where we are time-wise. If there are any more questions.
It looks like someone wants your students from your Catellus class to give a presentation in this series, or to us in general, you guys to come and do a talk on your project.
That would be nice. These young ladies are now 2 years beyond me. So I don't know if I could recollect them, but yeah, they did amazing work. It would be nice. Yeah.
Well, if nobody else has anything pressing in the chat, I want to thank Bob on behalf of Kane. I'm so glad you guys all came on this crazy, for some of us, or a lot of us, first week of school back. I know aspirationally it's much easier to sign up for a webinar than it is to actually show up for one. So I'm so glad that you guys all joined us. And if you know of people who would benefit from this, the recording, I did press record, so the recording will be available. In fact, I'm going to stop recording now. It will be on the Kane website soon.